Sarah Biehl, welcome to the Single Track Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I know folks in your area of the country like Arlen Glick and Michael Owen have made it a part of their mission to communicate that Ohio is not necessarily flat, but I'd love to hear from you too. What's it like being a trail runner there?
Yeah, so where I live currently and where I work and train about 4 or 5 times a week is in Columbus, Ohio, which Columbus, Ohio is probably the flattest part of Ohio. I live super close to the city, but during the weekends, I typically drive about an hour, 20 minutes, sometimes 2 hours south or southeast to run on some of the awesome hidden gem trails or gravel back roads in Athens County or at the Shawnee State Forest in Portsmouth, which is where my college town is from. And, you know, there's just so many hidden gems in Ohio. And to kind of give an example of the trail running and the climbing that can be found in Ohio, my coach, Michael Owen, he puts on an awesome race at the Shawnee State Forest, which again is in the same town where I went to college. And there's a couple different distances, but there's a 50 miler, or it's advertised as a 50 miler. It's actually 54. But within 54 miles, there's about 11,000 feet of climbing. So you can get a good amount, and it's absolutely beautiful out there. And what is really unfortunate about these the Shawnee State Forest and maybe the Zaleski State Forest or any of the trails in Athens or Portsmouth, they're not only hidden gems to people outside of Ohio. I feel like there's very few people, even in Ohio, that have lived here their entire lives that have heard or been to these areas, which is so unfortunate. But, I just feel like it's a little secret that I know of, but I want everyone else to know.
It's an incredible commitment in my mind that you're able and willing to drive an hour and a half on the weekends one way to get to the trails you need. Given that you're at the top of the sport, we'll talk about your JFK performance in a second, and trail running is such a big part of your life. Do you ever think about where you're based and how that impacts training? And I guess also thinking that a lot of the scene is out west in terms of who you're competing against and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it is, I guess being in Columbus is a little hard just because, my training's on the weekend. I have to add on, that extra drive time, and just being a little bit creative during the week on different workouts or trying to find hills in Columbus. It's a little hard. But, it is kind of fun to mix it up a little bit. Now, I think the hardest thing about being in Ohio or East Coast, or if you want to consider Ohio Midwest, whatever it is, but it is hard just because a lot of these bigger races are out west, and it's not super cheap to travel from east to west necessarily. And I'm one, I love to race, so I would like to race a lot more than I do now. But unfortunately, just kind of budgeting wise, that's a factor. I have to pick and choose on a few different races a year, or the bigger races at least to get out west. That, and I feel like one of the bigger challenges as well would have to be, altitude. I can drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to trails, get to some good vert. I can't drive an hour and a half to 2 hours to get altitude. And so that's a bigger challenge. But I will say the trail running community is smaller in Ohio, but there's such a great group, especially in Athens County. The running store that I run for, Ohio Valley Running Company, they have a great thing going. Jonathan and Ariana, who run that store, they have a good group that meets, and there's the Trail Sisters of Athens. They have a couple different groups. So there is a small community here, and they're super supportive, which is awesome. So that part I feel like I'm still thriving with being in Ohio. it's the travel and altitude that I do feel like is a little bit trickier.
One other thing that I'm curious about, you this past November, you registered a course record performance at the JFK 50, just an incredible time, an incredible run. And it makes me wonder, how would you categorize yourself as a runner? Like, are you somebody that is attracted to those types of courses where, there is a bit on the Appalachian Trail there, but a lot of it is this flat, rhythmic type running? Or are you someone that, if you had the opportunity, the majority of your time would be spent in the mountains or, at a race like Black Canyon, for example? Talk about that.
So I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out. I kind of like a little bit of everything, and for different reasons. Like training for JFK and that style of racing, that was so much fun. That whole builds, or the multiple builds that I've done for the JFKs, super fun. I love that race in general. But also a race like I did Canyons last year, and I had it equally as much fun racing that, but that's, a lot more climbing and kind of preparing for that looked different. But I think that's what draws me to trail running, is that you can mix it up and you don't necessarily have to, find one niche. So, I think that I thrive more maybe in the faster courses, but I like what there is else to offer, like in the mountains and the climbing and trying to find different things.
When you have such an impressive big performance like you did at JFK 50, I guess this is a two-part question, but A, does that internally change anything for you, or did you always know that you had that performance in you? And then B, does that change anything externally for you? Like, does it make you want to reevaluate your relationship with the sport? Are there new doors that open, stuff like that? So what are your thoughts there?
So I feel like more than anything, it was really big internal change for me. I feel like after JFK, I gained a lot of confidence in myself. It was JFK proved to myself that I can accomplish something, even if it is a long-term goal. JFK this year was a multiple year build. It was something that, I had watched myself progress and grow. And also that, there's a silver lining in things maybe not going exactly as planned, or, falling maybe a little short of your goal. Just like last year at JFK, for example, I got second and I was super happy with that performance. But when you get second, you want to go back and get first. You want to win, being kind of that close. And, if I would have I've thought about this quite a bit since JFK. If I would have won last year or in 2021, I may have not went back in 2022, and or at least maybe not for a little while. And I wouldn't have went back and, with the goal of winning, but also setting the course record. So it's been a lot of the thought process since then, that might not have happened for me if things would have went, flawless in 2021. So just looking, I think JFK has helped me see the bigger picture of, in the longevity of the sport. Now for externally, it makes me want to thrive, to get like a sponsorship and to have more doors open for me. I'm still not sponsored right now, which is totally fine. I've made more connections, but it makes me like, that's a even bigger goal of mine since JFK.
Right on. And I think, until that moment comes, and I'm sure it will, there is sort of a liberating and kind of cool feeling running for yourself and being to some extent a dark horse, which I think is interesting. Couple questions about Black Canyon. The first is, you talk about this commute that you often have to make to get on applicable training surfaces. Is that a concern for you at all in this build, or do you feel like you've spent enough time on feet on trail specific surfaces with a lot of up and down to get ready for the demands of a race like Black Canyon?
I think with any race or any course that I haven't seen, There are questions and unknowns, but I do feel like the training that I have done, the climbing, the atmosphere that I've been in, I feel prepared for it, but also I always know that unless it's like a JFK where I've been to the race multiple times, there are still unknowns. So, you know, pretty confident about still being able to hold my own, but knowing that there's a lot of different things that I might not be fully prepared for, and that's okay.
When you raced out west last year at the Canyons 100K, what were some of the biggest takeaways or lessons from that experience that maybe you applied in this go around for Black Canyon?
I think maybe you know for this build, I'd say so. Canyons was definitely a net uphill, but on some of the more downhill sections,
Yeah.
I I noticed last year, my legs definitely fatiguing more than the uphill. And I know that Black Canyons is a net downhill. So I feel like over the past year, I've really tried to focus on, finding those downhills, especially in workouts and really trying to, work on form or I don't just nailing the downhill running, which I feel like I've
Yeah.
gotten better at that. There's always room for improvement. It's not still like a super strong suit of mine, but I do feel like that's what I've worked on since Canyons leading up to a race like this.
What is exciting you most about this race right now? Like when you think about your motivations and your purpose at Black Canyon, what's top of
I
mind?
think the competition in the women's field, I am so excited. I think over the years, especially competition has excited me the most, especially since I've started doing ultras. I think that the women's running scene has just been booming, and just to
Yes.
be a small part of that is super exciting. And I feel like the best way, like to get the best out of ourselves, we need competition. And so I'm excited, wherever that falls in line, to just see what I can do amongst these amazing women that are going to be on the line.
If you are in a position to take it, would you take a golden ticket to Western States?
Absolutely. That's, I think there are some people that, go to golden ticket races and they don't want it. And that's totally fine. But I'm really excited. And if that were to be an option, I would definitely take it.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, super excited to watch your race next weekend. We'll make sure to link to all of your social media in the show notes. Is there anything that you want to leave listeners with to think about? Any final thoughts before we go?
I'm really excited to be out there. And, if anyone's out there racing or cheering, just say hi. I'm really excited.